Hi, I'm Simon Isaacs and I lead the commercial and industrial print division at Ricoh UK, and this is our Anything in Print podcast. Thank you for joining us today. We are really glad to have you here because this business podcast series is designed specifically for you, the print community. This show is about bringing you the latest advice, tips and strategies from our network of experts within the print and related industries like marketing, business and finance. It's all about knowledge sharing to help you and your organisations reach your purpose and fulfil your business goals. But before we dive in, remember you can find all of our education video content on our Ricoh Anything in Print series page. Now, let's begin.
Hi, my name's Tim Carter, and welcome to today's podcast, which we are calling The Science of Collaboration. But more specifically, it's about why printers and creative agencies need to change the way that they work together, particularly in view of the new world that we're going to operate in as we come out of lockdown and as we experience life after COVID. But just to introduce things and just to set the scenario and put some context around this, I think the events of last year has shown us the power and influence of print in many cases, going all the way back to the Prime Minister's letter back in March, through social distancing, graphics to increase in uptake of printed books at shop catalogues prior to the busy Christmas period. And I think with all of us being bombarded by digital forms of communication this year, and therefore, printers themselves are going to have to compete even harder to get their wallet share. Often having great printing equipment, even combined with the best advertising engine, we experience is not enough to win the creative minds and work on these truly inspiring concepts that involve an impactful printed product. In our Anything in Print webinars, we previously spoke about the how-to guides when pitching work to creative agencies. But what we want to discuss in this episode is the importance of true collaborations and a winning formula that you could replicate next time you go after a big creative print contract. And just before I introduce my guest, I'm reminded of a quote from Marissa Mayer. When you need to innovate, you truly need collaboration. So I'm really pleased today to be joined by Danny at TM, the agency behind the famous Fedrigoni 365 calendar. Danny, welcome to the webcast, and I'm really pleased to have you here with me today.
Thank you, Tim. Thanks very much for having me. It's a pleasure.
Good. Well, I just want to start maybe by you giving us a little bit more information about your business, TM, but I'm also really intrigued to understand a little bit more about this Fedrigoni calendar, which has created a huge impact and has turned a number of heads. So maybe just to start off with, tell me a little bit more about your business, and then we can talk specifically about this particular project.
Absolutely. So yeah, we're TM. We're a graphic design agency. At our heart, that's our training and that's our background. We sort of specialize in branding and creating identities for a variety of businesses in a variety of sectors. And then we work with those businesses to create projects, and to deliver different pieces for them, different marketing pieces, different printed pieces, different digital pieces across, a wide variety of outputs. And one of the things that we're quite proud of at TM is that we're not sector specific. We don't want to just work with one type of client. We like to solve problems across the board for lots and lots of different clients in different sectors, because each one of those has different sets of problems, and we love to get to know what those are and how we can help fix them through visual communications. And that's something we really, that's in our hearts, and that's something we set out to do right, from day one. And having said that, there are a few areas that we seem to have become quite niche specialists in. And this is working with architects who we have a real sort of strong foothold with, and we do a lot of work with architects on their brand identities and then their websites, and from that often lots of printed outputs, from brochures and books through to their day-to-day corporate communications like letterheads and business cards. And we're sort of fascinated by their world, and we love sort of working in that world. But alongside that, we also have made a habit of working with paper companies, and I think Fedrigoni and their relationship with us has sort of charted the rise of TM. So we started 5 years ago, and we've been working with Fedrigoni for about 4 of those years on various different projects. 365 probably being the most well-known of all those projects, and the one that's had the most visibility over the years. But we started on a little project 4 years ago called Label Lab, which was all about it was an event. It was a workshop, an event, and we invited a panel of speakers to come and talk about their relationship to labeling papers. So there's a lot of bottle designers, people that did label designs for wine bottles, and it was a really fascinating world that we're not, we don't know a huge amount about, but actually, it was really nice to sort of bring an event like that together and create all sorts of promotional tools for it. And then off the back of Label Lab, we did some work on a project called Fedrigoni Plus, which was a kind of reminder to the print industry of Fedrigoni's amazing materials and the materials that they specifically hold in the UK. Obviously, they're an Italian company, and they have good links to Europe, constant links to Europe, but they wanted to remind people about the stock they hold in the UK and the ease of access to that. So we did a project around that involved lots of collaboration, designer collaboration. So we kind of oversaw and curated a project of posters that all folded down and sat within a beautiful shoulder case box. And that was a really good project, really successful. And while we were working on that, we were also working on the first edition of 365.
I'm really interested to understand a bit more about the 365 project, Danny. I mean, I've got my own personal copy here, and I have to say that the quality and the innovation that's been built into this is absolutely phenomenal. So could you maybe just give me more of an in-depth understanding in terms of, how the engagement took place and what the processes were that were considered before you actually embarked on this, and actually how you actually produced it as well?
Absolutely, yeah. What I'll do is I'll just rewind slightly, because I think the sort of chronology of the project is quite interesting, sort of rewinding back to 2018 when we started working on this project. So Fedrigoni had always had a calendar, a printed calendar, which was always designed by one agency, and the agency would pretty much spec a paper from Fedrigoni's range, come up with some printing methods they'd like to lay down on the paper, and the overall design of the page. But it was a printed calendar, so it's a desk diary almost. So you would receive that as a client of Fedrigoni's, and you could write in it, and you could use it as your agenda for the year. They would give that every year to a different design agency to work on. So every year there'd be another take on this project. So it was a nice idea. When we got the brief, I questioned whether desk diaries were still something that designers, graphic designers, from my world, would actually use still. I, for one, am guilty of probably receiving things like that in the post from people in the print world and putting them in the recycling bin, early January, because they just don't really serve any purpose to me, and they just clutter, unless they're an exceptional piece of print, which actually some of these were, I have to say. I've got no use for them. I'm not going to hold on to them. So I think every promotional item that's produced really needs to count and really needs to resonate with the audience that receives it. So we really questioned, the core thought of this particular job and 365 and a calendar per se. And we went back with a few proposals to Fedrigoni about what we thought we could do with it. One of which was the resulting publication that people know about now, and effectively we flipped the brief on its head, and we thought, rather than just us designing this calendar, we'll design the framework, we'll design the overall architecture of the page, but then we'll give an area of that page to 365 different designers, each to design a piece of work for. And we did that for a number of reasons, not least of all because we wanted the opportunity for Fedrigoni to speak to as many people as possible. And by allowing people into this project and allowing them to become part of it, they're obviously really invested in the project. They're advocates for Fedrigoni. They get to use Fedrigoni paper. I'm sure that many of them hadn't necessarily ever used a Fedrigoni sheet before. So all of a sudden, there's this like doorway open to them. There's a relationship between them and Fedrigoni. So that was the first year, and there was 365 designers involved. And it was a bit of a slog to kind of get people involved the first year, because I've got a big, I've been in the industry for a while, but I don't have 365 names of graphic designers that I know that I can invite to take part in something like this. So it was a struggle at first to get people involved, and I think we had about 200 odd people that signed up, within, from just asking them, people we knew, people that people knew, just trying to find an audience, find some participants to take part in this. And so in the end, we got there. We got to 365. They all appeared in the book. The first book was the black one, which I'm holding up to the camera now. Hopefully you can see that, which was on Serio Ultra Black predominantly, printed in silver throughout. So it's a really beautiful piece of print. And I think for us, it was all of, the parameters that we set in terms of being all in black, just having silver was a way of unifying all the designs together, because obviously 365 designers all have very disparate aesthetics. So we wanted something that bound the aesthetics together. So that was the first year. And it was, I think it's fair to say, a resounding success. It kind of achieved far more than the previous year's calendar ever did for Fedrigoni. It really, put them in the spotlight with a number of designers. We had a launch event in the Protein Gallery in Shoreditch that pretty much everyone in the book tried to attend, and it was 250 person capacity. So we had like queues of people trying to get in from outside. So, all of those kinds of things point to it being a success and a worthwhile project to have done. So rather than flip it again the next year, Fedrigoni asked us to do it again. Much the same story. We used white paper though for 2019. So this is the book here, and you can make out all the different stocks. There are 10 different Fedrigoni white stocks running through it. And for me, this was really fascinating to see actually, when you're thinking about white paper, it's not white. There's variations in there. There's blues, purples, creams, yellows, greys, all sorts going on. And other than that, we tried to make this a much softer looking object. It's a bigger object, but it's a very soft sheet on the outside, old mill, and it has blind embossing running throughout and white foiling. So it's kind of got a very different aesthetic to the first year. And then the third year, which was 2020's edition, we went with a coloured paper of Fedrigoni's, which is called Woodstock, and had different signatures of the book on different colours from the range. So all of the books kind of evolved and took different directions in terms of the materials used and the way that the ink went down onto the paper. This is just black and white, lithographic white printed inside. But we tried to sort of innovate every time and do different things with the format. So this has a cover that wraps around. It's like an 8-page cover that wraps from front to back to bulk out the cover a bit and to make it. I think the card on the outside is 285 GSM. So by doubling it up and not duplexing it, not gluing it, we wanted to sort of do as minimal, not a light touch in terms of the production to the paper. So we just kind of bulked it out by coming up with a different way of wrapping a cover onto the book block. And again, every year it's been a success. And I think what I should have said is the kind of followers for this project have grown year on year. So that first year it was a bit like, right, this is coming out of the left field. No one knows of this project. We've got to do everything we can to get it under people's noses. In the 4 years we've been running it, particularly 2020, we had over 1,000 people who applied to be in the book. And we thought, this is great. We've got an audience now. There are people that actually, they want to be in this project every year. It's not just like, starting from scratch every year. We've already got a list that builds up throughout a year of people who want to participate. So that was why we started to think about how can we get all of those people involved in the project? How can we involve every single one of them? And that's where digital came in. That's where Rico and you guys came in with the latest edition. And it's all about variability, as you mentioned. So I've got a copy of it over here. It's got just under 1,000 participants in it this year, which is fantastic to have that many people involved. And obviously every single copy of the book is unique. right from the GSK Trace jacket, which is printed in white ink, and it features a list of every single designer who took part in the project this year. Only the names of those who are in the specific book you're holding are sort of printed in 100% white, and the rest are tinted back. So each one of those jackets is entirely unique. When you take the jacket off, you have a cover which is made up of 2 gradient meshes overlaid, which pick up on what's possible with the Ricoh machine, the 7200. It's using really bright neon colors from that machine to kind of, you know, play with what's possible on there and sort of really show that to the full extent of what you can do with it. So these gradients overlay each other in entirely unique ways across the range of 4,000 books that were produced. And then I think the thing that's really interesting about it, because I've seen variability in covers before, you know, in one-off pieces, but then actually the sequence of pages within the book is entirely unique again. So every book has a different sequence, and that's because we didn't ask designers to specifically design for a date for this year's edition. We asked them to design for a number. So you're either given 1 or any other number between 1 and 31. And then those numbers were pulled together. So all the 1s were in one pool, all the 2s were in another, all the 3s, etc. And then they would literally be grabbed out from the pools and dropped in programmatically, algorithmically into a page within the book, into a unique edition. So yeah, I mean, in terms of variability and the way this project's evolved, I think it's kind of been a really interesting evolution that's kind of demanded and a way for featuring more people. And I think going digital, going with Ricoh, using this machine has really opened the door for that and made this the success that it is this year. And normally it's really hard to measure the success of this project, you know, so early on in a year. But the other side of this project is the social media angle, the fact that, you know, every single designer in here becomes invested in the project, and they all publicize it. They post it on their Instagram accounts, they post it on their Twitter accounts. So for the next year, there's a constant buzz, literal buzz of a phone, in my case, where people are tagging us, tagging Fedrigoni, tagging Ricoh, tagging Meccano Technica, who bound the book for us, and bringing this whole project together on a sort of daily basis, and a reminder of, you know what it was and how it came together.
Right. I can absolutely vouch for the piece itself, having received my own personalised copy. So I can absolutely validate for everything you've said in terms of the quality and the enhancement techniques. And the piece itself, it stands out. It's remarkable. What I'd like to just understand a little bit more about is how did all of the interested parties and stakeholders come together and effectively collaborate to ensure that what was produced and what is submitted, you know, represents this fantastic piece of collateral?
Yeah, so I mean, that was really a 4-way in the end between us and Fedrigoni, and then bringing Ricoh on board, and then bringing Meccano Technica for the binding on board as well. And it was a really sort of early on cooperation. So we started speaking about this edition with Fedrigoni in January last year, obviously before the dirty word of COVID started to rear its head. And we were, you know, digital was one of the things we wanted to do, and we knew that Fedrigoni had a sort of, you know, a knowledge of what Ricoh did and the possibilities that sort of within your doors. So we arranged a meeting to come up to it's called the Experience Centre.
Yeah, Customer Experience Centre in Telford.
Yeah, so we had a meeting up there, and we met Andy Campbell, who we showed all the editions, as I just have to you, and we explained what we wanted to do with it. And it was just kind of like one of those amazing moments where you're meeting a collaborator who you can clearly see really understands the project, gets the project, sees the mutual benefit of it, and sees how a very sort of closely collaborative operation between ourselves could lead to something that would be a phenomenal end result. And I think Andy was obviously instrumental in that, and kind of got what we wanted to do with it, and then added layers on top of that in terms of what was possible. And I think when we went down to the Customer Experience Centre, I didn't have any preconceptions about what we were going to see. But I remember walking around saying to Andy, this is a bit like Willy Wonka's factory for print, because he kind of just, you know, showed us everything going on there, all the different bits of kit, And it was almost like, picking and choosing what could be possible, what could we do with it. At that time, we didn't know how we were going to produce it and what machine it was going to go on and what that machine was capable of doing. If it did neon colors, white inks, whatever else, that wasn't in our mind at that point. But we were very glad that it had that, because it adds a layer on top of, this production. It's something that sort of is a bit more unexpected about it and makes it that much more interesting. So it was that first meeting where we then went away, and then we came, we sort of specced out, having had a conversation, what we would like to do, what our wish list was. And then Andy sort of received that and sort of went through it and sort of rationalized and made sure that, those were possibilities that Ricoh could deliver on. I think the binding angle, we were very keen to do auto bound. So it's kind of almost like a lay flat soft cover production. And that's something that couldn't be handled by Ricoh internally, but obviously he had the right connection in Meccano Technica to deliver that for us. So I think knowing who those extra elements of your sort of supply chain are was key, and sort of getting them involved early, because clearly, we had a budget we're trying to hit and, a target we're trying to make. So we have to make sure that that's all going to align early on in the job. And I think, it's this fusion of technology, I'm talking about Ricoh and Meccano Technica, but within Ricoh, the number of different people that were involved in different sectors of your business, of which I can't list because there's so many, and I don't have the expertise to do it. But I know that there were people in the States doing the coding for us. There were people here working on the data in the UK, so making sure that all the data came together in the right way. And I think, it's that sort of combined effort which makes for such a great piece of print. It's more than the ink on the paper. It's that bigger story that kind of precedes it and sort of keeps it as this interesting piece of print.
Absolutely. And I think you're absolutely right. It is more than ink on paper. It's something that makes an impact. It's something that's memorable. And it truly demonstrates the power of print when used and implemented in the right way. Now, I want to just pick up on a couple of points that you made, just to develop the conversation a little bit further, Danny. I'm going to put myself in the position of many of my customers who have invested in Ricoh technology and are able to, and are capable of producing some fantastic enhancements for their customers, whether it be neon or whether it be embellishment or clear or invisible red, or being able to expand the color gamut or print on different types of media, whether they be plasticized or oversized, etc., etc. So the technical capabilities are there, but quite often the limiting factor will be the approach and potentially the behavior or the historic and legacy behavior that printers have taken when either being afraid of or not inclined to go out and look and promote these really added value applications. So what advice would you give to printers across the UK using Ricoh technology that have the ability to create all these fantastic effects and replicate something like the 365 calendar? What advice would you give to them initially to help them to collaborate and engage with the agency sector and the design sector to be able to fully exploit these technological advancements that they currently have and invested with?
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting one. I think there are a couple of angles to take with this. First of all, I think what tends to be the case is that printers don't always talk the same language as the clients and the designers they're speaking to. So their communication pieces they may have the technical know-how and the technicalities and the production values demonstrated on that marketing piece they put together to talk about themselves. But from a design point of view, it can be punching at a very different level to a very different type of designer. And I think, they need to be trying to target the upper tier of the graphic design world or the advertising world, because those are the ones, if they select to work with them, that will trickle down to everyone else, through the influence of social media and other things. So I think, first of all, yeah, it's about speaking the same language. And we've had, instances in the past where we've worked with printers, and you're asking questions as a designer who has some experience, but you're not getting the right answers, or you're not getting timely answers. You're finding that the printer maybe has to go back and speak to someone else or the manufacturer to get the answer. And I think all those little elements make for a, unpleasant overall experience. And really, you want your printer to demonstrate to you they speak the same language and they know far more than you about print. And, that sounds like quite a stupid thing to say, but sometimes, I feel like I'm asking for things that I know a printer can do, and they are they're hesitant to do it, or they don't want to do it. And I think tying that all together is the idea of bespoke production now. So, moving away from commodity print into a world where you're using really high-end paper with really high-end print technology to do something truly unique that sort of adds value to the overall printed piece that's being put out there. And I think, showing that you can do bespoke is key. And I think digital is perfect for that, because, you might be producing, 50 copies of a book that has huge production values around it, which actually the ink on the paper might only be or the toner on paper might be a very small part of that, but it's a case-bound book with foils all over it and all sorts of other production techniques going into it. So demonstrating that, and that you understand that and you can do that kind of work is really important. Yeah.
Interesting. So there's been a reoccurrence of this notion of collaboration and becoming a genuine partner with the agency or with the designer, and being able to talk the same language and being able to be more empathetic in terms of what the business outcome of that product is going to offer to the end user, rather than it being a function of the technology itself. So just developing this concept a little bit further. If we look at the factors that led to the successful completion of the 365 calendar, you repeated on many occasions that we as an organisation were a collaborator rather than a facilitator of print. So what was it that we can do, or that our customers can do more of? So it seems to me it's not just about understanding the brief from a technical perspective, it's about being able to actively contribute to it as well in terms of ideas and additional thoughts, and that's something that you highlighted in terms of the value you got in dealing with Rico. But again, in being able to help our customers adopt a similar approach, what would your response be, or what would your advice be?
I think it ties back into the previous sort of question and the recommendations there. But I think, speaking the language and demonstrating, you understand the brief to that nth degree, or to add layers onto the brief, as you say. So we're working at the moment on a book project in a sector that I had no experience in whatsoever, just literally, never done a book. And I'm talking about sector, I'm talking about a type of book. And I've just never done it before, but I'm not going to admit to the client that, clearly, because I want to I want to do the work. So we approached the usual suspects, the printers that we work with. Some of them said, not for us, we don't do this. Actually, none of them, it's not really in their skill set, but one of them has gone out of their way to, right from the first conversation, start prototyping things up for us, showing us how the mechanics of this book would work, getting involved where it's not about money at that point. They're literally, it will be down the line, but at this point, we haven't even discussed the budget. They're going, well, I think we could do it like this. What do you think? And I'm getting copies of, fairly good prototypes sent to me that really show an interest and a sort of dedication to the job that just makes me think I'm in good hands here as a designer. I kind of, I don't know this particular format and style of a book. They haven't got a massive experience, but they're going out of their way to prove that they can do it, and they're learning themselves, I guess. And I think that's what you want. You want to feel like they've got the reins, they know what they're doing, they've understood the brief, and they're going to show you and demonstrate that they've got it, that they've understood it.
Okay, that's interesting, and I think really good feedback. I think that the impact of the dirty word COVID is will have a significant impact on economy, society, but relating it more to the print industry, it is going to inevitably change the habits of either consumers or businesses in the way that they consume print in the future. My own personal belief, and it's shared by a number of other people, is that when we come out of lockdown and we start to return to some form of normality, print as a medium for communication needs to probably work even harder than it did before. It needs to differentiate. It needs to stand out. It needs to absolutely optimize that tactile nature that only print can offer to a consumer. And it needs to communicate louder than any other digital alternative for communicating. What's your personal view around that?
Yeah, I think it's been building up that way for years as well, because wherever print happens, each one of those pieces needs to be amazing. It needs to really just do more than just be a kind of very commodity thing, sort of, floppy bit of paper with some bad graphics and bad print on it. It needs to really capture someone's attention. And I think that's why we've seen a rise in high production value pieces and a sort of moving away from all of those kind of very commodity driven pieces. And I think coronavirus is obviously going to impact that even further. For us, it tends to be that a lot of the printers we work with have more than just print in their arsenal, within their factories. They can do all sorts of other things. Might be able to bind there, they might be able to foil there, they might be able to gilt edge, or there's if they have those processes in-house. I know it's not the case for the vast majority of them, but having those in-house kind of opens the doors for much more interesting print, and it means you're having a conversation as a designer with someone who understands how to add value to print and understands how they can do more with the print that's happening within their four walls. Obviously, there are finishing houses that can do this stuff externally, but I feel like when you find those printers that have the kit to deliver on lots of different elements, the overall feeling is that you're in good hands and that you're going to get a really interesting printed piece back from them, and you can have that conversation and really understand what's possible, because they work with this stuff themselves. They have the handlers there that actually deal with these bits of technology themselves on a daily basis. Anyway, that's slightly tangential, but I think the idea is that every piece of print really needs to communicate on the highest level now. There is no place for bad print, bad design, poorly thought through paper choices, production choices. I think adding value to every piece is going to be key.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely critical, and certainly I think will resonate with the people listening to this. And I think it is going to require, and it may be uncomfortable, but it is probably going to require commercial printers, print service providers in the future to maybe operate outside of their comfort zone. What would your views be around that?
I mean, we often push printers to do things that are outside of their comfort zone. We ask for things that, just to contradict what I'm saying, if they don't have it in-house, they have to try and outsource it. And I think actually being pushed beyond your comfort zone often leads to interesting places. The example I gave of the book format that I don't know, I could have said just no to that job. I'll just walk away from it. I don't need the stress. But I think actually, based on the current environment we're all working under, you don't want to say no to any jobs. Not least of all when you look at it and you think, actually, I can deliver on that. I do know how to. I do know, I can get the right people to help me deliver on that job. So being pushed beyond your comfort zone, I think is a positive thing. And I think we shouldn't be afraid to collaborate on a wider basis and get the right resources together to make something happen.
one of the key drivers and key performance indicators for many corporate organisations is their brand, whether it be brand awareness, brand identity, or brand recognition. So how do you feel that print as a method of communication would be able to help as part of that overall corporate objective?
I think maintaining your brand standards in print, is always been key to any brand out there, whether it's a corporate giant or a small startup business. And I think, we often talk about, a brand is what people say about you when you leave the room. Is that moment of when I'm not there, as TM as a brand, when I'm not there, what do people say about us? What do they think about us? What do they think about the work we do? And I think print is one of those key pieces that it is the leave behind. It is the thing that sort of sticks in people's minds. It is where people can infer a lot about you. So having really high quality print that is always on standard, that is always, to color standards, guideline standards, all of those brand standards is incredibly important. It's probably never been more important. I think, there's a tendency for people to, they're doing less print and more online. But equally, you've got to maintain those standards across the board, because these are all things that breed trust. And, if my brand identity has a yellow color in it and half the time it looks orange or red, that's clearly something that's going to reflect very badly on the business to people that know it. So I think, those brand standards are incredibly important and something that, still need to be maintained by printers, and printers understanding the importance of that as well.
Sure, yeah, thank you. And I think, again, referring back to one of the topics we discussed earlier, was that technology is not a limiting factor now, because, with digital technology, with Ricoh digital technology in particular, being able to reach some of those difficult colours within the colour gamut is now available through the technology and the enhancements that are available. So
yeah,
it's not a limitation in the technology as it potentially used to be.
Yeah, and well, absolutely. And actually, what we've seen often with digital is that gamut is actually wider, so you can achieve more. You can get to those hard to hit colors that traditional 4-color lipo just wouldn't achieve without having to have a Pantone brought in or whatever. So, I think those are really interesting opportunities. And yeah, when you're going digital, you've got so many possibilities around that color. Yeah,
and I think from my experience, in addition to that, what's even more attractive is the quantities are at a manageable amount, and it can be provided just in time as well. So you combine all those things together, it becomes a very, very powerful medium. Danny, I really appreciate your time today. I found the topic and the conversation, really, really interesting. So thank you for your insight. Thank you for your feedback. And just in wrapping up, there is more information available on the Fedrigoni website. So if anybody wants to get any more information around this 365 calendar, please visit the Fedrigoni website. But for now, thank you for your time. I hope you enjoyed today's webcast.
That's a wrap for today. Thanks for listening. I hope you found this episode informative. If so, make sure you subscribe to all of our upcoming episodes and let us know any feedback you may have. You can also connect with myself and my guests on our Anything in Print series page.